Hello, Martha. We're so glad to have you here on the Embracing Only podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Archita. Thanks for having me.
We are really excited today to have Martha Aviles, who is the VP of Marketing at Austin-based Gigster, a firm that accelerates the delivery of digital transformation applications, giving companies the agility to thrive in a software defined world. She has over 20 years of high tech marketing experience in SaaS, semiconductor, networking, and network security. And she's done this across the whole gamut from startups, private and public companies. And she is one fierce marketing leader. And for any of our listeners who know, I love marketing and I love self advocacy. And I'm so excited to have her on here because she brings the gift of building and growing high performance marketing teams, inspiring thought leadership, and she's had extensive experience across that whole funnel of marketing. Prior to joining Gigster, she was the VP of marketing at Austin-based Talroo and also held senior leadership roles at RigUp and Envirus. I'm really excited to welcome you on the Embracing Only podcast. Welcome again, Martha.
Thanks again for having me. I'm excited for our chat.
Same here. Really looking forward to this. So, Marta, one of the things we learned when we were chatting here earlier today is you're a first generation Latina that has absolutely broken many a glass ceilings, whether it be in tech or becoming a top executive across the tech scene in Austin. What were some of your learnings as you navigated being and only the first at many of the tables that you occupied in your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I'm humbled by that. I don't feel like I've broken glass ceilings yet, but I got it. I think that would be one of the
Yes.
things. So, as a child of immigrants, like it's never
Yes.
enough. Like it's never enough. You always have to do better. You always have to do more. So, yeah, but what I will say is something that I struggled a lot in the beginning. There were so many times where, quite honestly, I was trying to be a white male executive. I was trying to talk like a white male executive. I was trying to behave like a white male executive. And I would say probably 5 or 6 years ago, I had this moment with my executive coach uh, where I realized like I'm never going to be a white male executive. Like it's not going to happen. I actually used to not talk about being a child of immigrants, but now I talk about it. Like that's something that, is in my bio. But the reason I talk about it is because first of all, I want other people to hear my story and hopefully get inspired by it or feel a little bit of courage to own them, who they are and their authenticity. Um, and I think that's a really super important thing. I think having a community, whether that community is just like minded individuals or more people that look and act like you. And sometimes that's hard to find. But again, like I mentioned, and coaches and marketing advisors and try to do all of the learning. I pretty much was a sponge for a long time. I mean, I still am. I'm a lifelong learner. But for example, I went and got an MBA because I was like, well, I'm not a white male, so I want to have that card to play in case I ever need it. And people are
Yes.
like, "Oh, you must love school." I did not love school. Let me be clear. That it was hard. I went to school full time and I worked full time, and it was horrible. And I don't recommend it for anyone, but that's why I did it, right? So, yeah. Hopefully, I answered your question. There's just a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, and you absolutely have broken glass ceilings. I mean, being a first gen, you know, Latina in tech. I mean, can you think of it? There's a three kind
Yeah.
of, a double, like triple edged sword right there, right? That could constantly, like things that could constantly show up at every stage, whether that be in high school, in university, and in the workplace, across all, and in the startup world, which is the white bro culture, right? To be able to navigate it. So, give yourself a pat on the back for that because that is just phenomenal.
Thank you.
But you said something there that I really want to unpack a little bit because I've been there. Two things. We'll park on one of them, which is the immigrant parent thing in a bit. We'll get to that here in a bit because there's so much to unpack there. But the you mentioned about uh, when you were kind of growing in your career, you um, emulated a lot of what white male
Mhm.
executives did. I had a similar experience because that's what success looked like to me. That's
Right.
what winning in the corporate world looked like to me. Those were my only examples. And I once had a coach, mentor who asked me this question was, Achita, who do you look up to in the company? And as I was looking at growing or whatever, and I said, well, I named two white men. And he's like, well, what about them inspires you? And I'm like, I don't have this, but they have this and this and this. And he's like, why are you seeking something you do not have in someone else versus seeking what you do have, which are your strengths, and finding someone who amplifies it like times 10 times 20, etc., right? And that
Mm.
was my aha moment, to be like, wow, I had not ever considered that, and I got to kind of switch it up. So what was like your moment? You mentioned it was 5 years ago, but what kind of triggered that for you to kind of take a step back and say, well, okay, I need to identify who I am first, and then be that person to help continue to like pave the way forward for others that are like me.
Yes. So I love that you asked this question. I was in a board meeting presenting slides to a group of white male executives. I wasn't a VP yet, I was a senior director, I believe, at the time. And I got the feedback of like, why can't you present more like Scott? I'm not using an actual
Yeah,
person's
yeah.
name, but it was, a what, and it crushed me. I mean, like it
Hmm.
crushed. I cried about it for days before I even called my coach to be like, "Can we talk about this?" Like, and in the process of being crushed, I was like, wait a minute. I had always thought that being a female executive was going to be a struggle. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I only accepted struggle as that's what it always would be. And I've now started to enjoy it and I've now started to thrive. But it was
Yes.
that moment of I'm never going to be Scott. Like I cannot be Scott. I'm 5'3". I'm Nicaraguan. My parents are Nicaraguan. I was born in Miami. I didn't speak
Yes.
English till 1986. And no one in that room looked like me. Right.
Yes.
So having that kind of meltdown, if you will, I realized with my coach, like I don't want to try to be Scott anymore. I'm not good at it. I'm never going to be good at it. No matter
Yes.
how many times I tried to emulate it or be inspired. It also wasn't inspiring, but I really didn't have that aha until I had that moment of feedback that I realized like, oh, this I can never do this. But it was also like now I'm really aware of the environments that I work in, and I want to work where I can be seen and not compared to a white male executive, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. I love that, I'm sorry that you had to experience that, because I can assure you every only on here has experienced this in some way, shape, or form. But it's like, be more like, be less like, or speak quieter like, think more like, all of this jazz. But
Yeah.
and I cannot imagine what it's like going through it in a board meeting, especially like where you probably felt like you crushed it, you showed up like you did a great job, and then to receive that feedback. So, what did you do in that moment? Because a lot of us have navigated this in different ways. How did you turn that around for yourself? To then, I know you said that you switched your mindset, but how did you go back to that person who gave the feedback, or did you go back to that person that gave that feedback? Or how did you navigate that next time to ensure that you created that space to be Martha?
Sure. So one thing that I've built this up over the time of my life, and I still work on it every day. Is just that grittiness. You have to
Yes,
be gritty, and you have to get up every day and think, well, today is a fresh day. I
yes,
also realized that we can't look for validation in others. So with feedback, it's what Brene Brown says all the time, right? Like I want feedback from people that are in the arena, have had their butts kicked, and that I
yes,
value. Like this person is someone that sees me and that I value their feedback. What I had to come to terms with is that the person that gave me that feedback, I wasn't going to go back to convince him otherwise. I wasn't going to have any more dialogue about it. Like it wasn't going to be productive,
no,
right? So it's really about like you have to find your own internal locus of control and your authenticity and embrace that. And sometimes you're going to get 10 rejections from it, or you're going to get
yeah.
consistent, and you just have to go elsewhere, like go where you're valued, you know?
Yes, 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 yes. Gosh, you mentioned grittiness, and actually, there's a story that I read in your bio wherein about how you've been really gritty, resilient, and bold. And at one point in time, you were in your dream job, and while you were in your dream job, you were forced to lay off 70% of your staff. Now that's really hard to do anyway, whether you're in a dream job or not. And this was due to the oil and gas industry like not doing well at that time. You were asked to do that. And we all have to make tough calls as leaders in different capacities. So how have you channeled your grittiness, and how do you encourage like other onlys as well to channel their grittiness and not hold back? And feel free to share, how that kind of transpired as you were um, no, I was going to say responsible, but you were not. But you were involuntarily put at the helm of having to lay staff off.
Well, I mean, I think first thing with grittiness or with any emotion or difficult thing you're going through, we have to process it. I think so many times as women, I'm going to generalize here, but I think it'll resonate at least with many of your listeners. We just think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, and you're trying to put those feelings in a box, and that doesn't work. Like it doesn't work. It's going to come out at some point. So you have to figure out how you process those feelings. Personally, I am a I'm going to say I do it through movement, but like I garden, I have like 160 plants. I have to go outside and like
Oh my
sweat.
gosh.
I live in
Wow.
Texas, so it'll be like 100 degrees and I'm outside sweating, but that's because it's my form of like meditation and processing. Like I can't get away from it. So, whatever those things are, you got to find your hacks for processing it. Then you have to come to terms with it. Like if it's a decision that, at the time what happened was COVID was declared a
Mm.
pandemic. Oil went negative, which I have an MBA and I still don't understand how that works. Basically, you had to pay people to take oil, but okay. And so they came to me and said, you have to lay off 70% of your team. Yeah, it was really terrible. Um, but know that it will get better and that there is like you're going to make this action. And it's unfortunate that a lot of times in that case, for example, your team members look at you as the bad guy and blame you.
Mm.
And there's a lot there that get coaches, get therapists, read, do podcasts. I do all those things. Um,
Yes.
but sometimes on the other side of it, people are better off for it, right? And they don't realize that. So for example, you asked, or in my intro when you said startups and bro culture, I had an offer rescinded in 2002 because I was graduating from university undergrad,
Mm.
and I thought I was going to work at a big company. And I was like, what does rescind mean? I didn't know. I'm a 22-year-old. I have no idea what that
Mm-hmm.
means. But after 9/11, a bunch of people were laid off. And
Mm.
at this company, they had like laid off 8,000 people and rescinded all their offers. So I was just
Mm.
one of like 8,000 people.
Right.
Um, but I started working in startups because those are the only people that were hiring. But I feel like it's made my career. So a
Mm.
lot of times, like really negative things in your life, or like the day that I was in that board meeting and then I cried myself to sleep that night. That's where
Mm-hmm.
like really negative pivotal moments in your life actually end up being a blessing. You get redirected to something better.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard to see it at that moment in time for sure.
Totally. Totally.
It's really, really hard to see. But I mean, it's first of all fascinating that you have 160 plants. I can't even keep one plant alive in my home. Literally, when I was leaving one of my jobs, my team gave me a plant as a joke, and basically, and it's like the heartiest plant. Is that the right thing? That you cannot kill it. Like there's no way you can kill it. And they're like, Achita, we're going to check in on you in 1 year to ensure that this plant is alive. It's still alive, and it's been 2 years since I have left that company. So very proud of myself. But that's pretty much one of the only ones alive. So I can see how therapeutic it can be, though, because there's so much science behind gardening as well, with regards to like having your hands touch soil. And uh, I can imagine when you're in these like high stress situations, you've got to find a way to make that decision, move on from the decision, support the people during the decision making process the best way you can, but
Yeah.
then know that they'll find their way. Give them the resources to be able to help find their way. But then you've got to kind of move on and do what you need to do as well. And um,
Yeah.
that absolutely is like understandable. But I wonder how grittiness has come into play. We'll go back to like our immigrant parent question. So uh, I am like first gen immigrant, I guess. My parents never immigrated to the US, but I am the immigrant who moved there. So that was me. But having just, I guess they are immigrant parents, right? Because they're my parents and I'm an immigrant. So
Yes.
figuring
Totally.
out the figuring out the translation there. And that's the other thing. A lot of things get lost in translation. So even
Mhm.
though I only studied English my entire life, and of course I know a bunch of other Indian languages, the reality is that when you only have heard multiple other languages growing up, um, certain colloquialisms get lost in translation. Like you mentioned, rescind and all of this other jazz, and you got to kind of learn that along the way. But there was a total digression there with my English language challenge. But you mentioned grittiness. So when you think about like your immigrant parents and like it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough. Like I've been there, I've navigated those waters. At what point in time did you recognize that you have a certain enough and that is going to be enough for you, and you're not going to constantly try to please others? Because that is one of the biggest curses we carry is, we talk a lot about this on Embracing Any podcast, is we feel like we are constantly performing for love
Mm.
because we were raised that
Right.
way.
Yeah,
It
totally.
was like, you got an A grade, mom, I got a grade A, like, are you proud of me? Like, oh, I got an whatever, whatever, are you proud of me? Like, you're constantly performing for love. So how did you make that transition, or like, are you still probably like navigating that learning, and what does that look like for you?
So I think with anything that's that deeply ingrained, because yes, ever since I was a small child, like I was in college before, or in at university as a 18-year-old, before I realized not everybody went to university. I mean, my parents from like the age of 2 or 3 were like, what college are you going to? What are you going to
Yes.
be? Doctor, lawyer, engineer. Doctor, lawyer, engineer. What
Yes.
college are you going to? Right, like that's it. I was in college before I was like, oh, not everyone has to do this. I thought it was like part of the education system. But to answer your question, I would say that I'm constantly learning and unlearning that. I would 2010 2020 was a very difficult year, right? There was a pandemic, obviously. Um, I left a job that it was a unicorn startup in Austin worth $1 billion. I mean, people were like, why would you leave? But after I laid off 70% of my team, I couldn't, I just didn't have it in me. I didn't have my spirit was lost, if you will.
Hmm.
But I will say in 2020, I've really started working on trying to not perform for love, or that people pleasing of like, let me do all these things. But I'll be really vulnerable and say, I really, really like my boss here at Gigster. He's fantastic. I really, truly feel like he values my skill set and sees me. But I was frustrated one day. It happens. People get frustrated. And I was like, you know what? This is a safe space for me to vent. And he said, I've already noticed that, you want to please everyone, and you're not going to please everyone here. But
Mm.
I'm in a new job. I'm trying to prove myself. And so it still happens. Right. And I think it's about being grateful for the progress that I've made and acknowledging that progress, but also continuing to learn and unlearn that, because it was, 40 years ingrained to me that like, this is what you
Yes.
do.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And it's hard. And I think for me, one of the learnings has been is, one of the biggest learnings of performing for love, because I left a toxic team environment at one time because I was like, I don't need to do this any longer. I don't need to perform for love any longer. But that trauma kind of is still stuck around 2 years later. And one of the biggest learnings was teaching people how to treat me. And I talk a lot about this on this podcast, because the minute you start teaching people how to treat you, and that's even family, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just not only reserved, and even family that's like immigrant family that is like, whoa, 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 don't bring like your corporate stuff into the home, like it's not going to work here. It's like, no, these are my boundaries, and you have to learn to respect that. And it takes a lot of courage, because you're trying to teach them how to unlearn how they show you love, because to them, your parents and family, it's like showing love is asking these like extremely intrusive questions, or uh, trying to get through the root cause of, what, why did you leave this like extremely lucrative career, like why would you do this, like things like
Yeah.
that, right? So that has been my experience. Like, how have you navigated that with your family, like outside of the corporate world, with regards to like unlearning that behavior?
It is so challenging with family. But what I will tell you is that my therapist taught me this.
Yeah.
I mean, I work on boundaries all the time, but she said they are your boundaries, and people cannot violate them unless you let them. And I was like, what? People violate them all the time. But I get her point was like, with my family, I have set certain boundaries. If they violate them, they won't engage with me.
Mm.
And it's not to punish them, but it's like, this is the respect. Like, this is the respect and boundaries that I need from you. If you don't want to honor that, if you have your boundaries and I have my boundaries and we've discussed them, I want to respect it and that sort of thing. If they don't want to honor that, then I just don't engage with them. It's been
Yes.
hard. It can be really isolating sometimes, but eventually, usually people come around because my boundaries aren't ridiculous, right? But they're just like, guys, for example, I am single. Um, that it's not like a choice. Like if I wish I had a life partner, but it's actually known all the places that it's very difficult for like high performing executive women
Yes.
to have partners.
Absolutely.
You know how many times my family has asked me like, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? My grandmother used to say, I mean, this is how I grew up. It would be like, you're going to move from your dad's house to your husband's house. And I bought my first house when I was 24. So that was like,
Yes.
what are you doing? You know what I mean? But
Yes. Yes.
so
Yes.
it's a challenge. I'm not going to say that it's easy or fun all the time, but you just have to,
No.
like, this is my boundary. And if you're not going to respect it, then we don't need to engage because you're not adding value to my life.
Yes, gosh, and I know the burden that you're carrying only because I have a sister who's like extremely high performing, similar, like doing so well, and it's threatening to men. Like it's so threatening to with men, women, whatever, right? And your partners in general, and it's so hard. And I think my parents, bless their hearts, for the last like 15 years, they've been on her case, right? Like just constantly, like this that anybody, first it was like you have to marry someone within the community, then it's like we don't care, let that person just be Indian, then like we don't even care, let it be anybody in the world, like just find somebody. And she's just like, listen, like I know who I am, I respect myself for who I am, and I'm not going to just settle with some random person just to please you guys, right? That's the biggest boundary you're holding, because you respect yourself and you understand like what you want and what you don't want in a life partner. And like finally, because she's done honestly an amazing job of like teaching all of us, me included, because I was terrible. Like about, it took probably 6 years ago is when I finally had I reset my mind and rewired my mind around this nonsense concept of like, oh my god, you need to be married at this age or some nonsense like that, you know what I mean? And to be like, no, those are choices. And to your point, right, sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't, because life happens. Like freaking who expected COVID in the middle of all of this, right? Like that's done a number on all of us in numerous ways. So respect to you, because that has got to be hard at every family dinner, uh, every holiday.
Anyone pick up an unhoused person, a homeless person. I'm like, guys, that's not how this works. It's not that I don't want
No.
to be married. I definitely want a partner in my life, but I want it to
Yes.
be the best person. And it's none of their business, honestly.
No.
It's not your business.
No, it's not their business. Exactly, Martha. Own that and love that. Love that. So, that's great. Like, let's talk about that bravery, because that bravery that you have there navigating your immigrant family, on how it takes a special kind of bravery, not just to survive, but thrive as a Latina in this world that is like often very unforgiving to minority voices. You gave this example earlier of, the boardroom incident, but can you share how you have leaned into like self advocacy and broken some of those biases that exist against like Latina women in tech? Uh, Double whammy there.
Sure. I would say one thing that you have to have a little bit of like be like a duck, let certain things roll off your back. People are going to say inappropriate things. I've been called the spicy Latina more times than I can count. I'd probably, if I had
Yeah.
10 for every time I've been called that, I'd be a millionaire. Like,
Yes.
there are certain times where it's like, this isn't worth my time and my headspace to engage. There are other times where I've educated people like, hey, and take them aside one on one. It's no need to like embarrass someone in a public setting, but take them aside one on one and educate them. A lot of times I would say, not sometimes, a lot of times I would say that it's either just patriarchal stuff that people don't understand or they're naive about. And once you bring them the awareness of it, it tends to change a little bit. Um, of course, it's still like I had to embrace like, hey, this is going to be isolating, and some days that's hard. Most
Mm.
days I'm proud of it now, because it's like, man, I had to do hard things to get here. But trust me, there are plenty of days where I'm like, this feels a little bit lonely. I want someone to talk to. I engage in conversations like this for that
Yes.
very reason, to that build that community and not feel that level of isolation. But I think you just really have to be. comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And if it
Yeah.
gets too much, I've been part of toxic work environments or places where I'm like, this isn't the place for me anymore. I leave. I think that we as women get very attached to things and we want to nurture things and we want to grow. And I think that's beautiful. But something that my coach, one of my coaches told me was sometimes you need to think of this company as a transaction and what do you need to get out of them to get to your next step. And I was like, you're right. What do I need to get out of them to get my next step? And you stop taking things maybe as personally and
Hmm.
you let some of the other stuff go. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
what I've
Yeah, no, and gosh, yes, I was like so many yeses over there because my mom told me once, like, your company owes you nothing and you owe them nothing. And I think
done.
that's really, really critical. Like, of course, like, you sometimes we get lucky, we work for companies that are truly changing lives in this world. But even then, even at that point, they're only responsible to their shareholders. No matter what the culture statement is, no matter what the mission statement is, whatever it might be, their number one responsibility is to their shareholders,
Mhm.
period. And so if when folks get so caught up into like, I'm so loyal, especially women, like I've been there, like say
Yeah.
especially women, I'm one of that women.
I'm one of them too. I'm one of them too. I can say it because
Yes.
my team, this company, I'm like, no.
No, exactly. Like, how are you saving yourself? Because if you can't save yourself, you can't save nobody. Like you literally cannot save anybody. I wonder if that is Olivia who's just joined us, because I know she was going to try to join us as well. So let's see. That would be a fun little surprise. But you're
While
absolute. What's that?
oh, I was gonna say while Olivia joins, so I just wanted to tell you a fun story that I haven't told
Yes.
on a podcast before, but one of my coaches, the one that I was crying to about, I can't be Scott. uh, she was like, Martha, you're one of the boldest women I've ever coached. I said, I'm bold. Like, I literally, this was like
Mm.
2017, 2018. She's like, yes, you're bold. And I was like, I am. And anyway, I sat with that. I marinated on it. And then I tattooed it on my wrist. It says
Oh my
bold, right?
God, I love that.
In case I
Yes.
ever forget, I just look down. But I'm like, listen, I made it this far. I've been bold. I can do it again.
Oh my God, I love that so much. Good for you. So I started my own company this year and it's called Ready, Set, Bold. And so I
Mhm.
totally love this. I'm like loving every aspect of this that you actually have bold tattooed on there.
Well,
Yes. Oh, love it.
well,
Love
but
it.
yeah,
Love it. I'm gonna actually that we're gonna have to like take a snippet of this and share this with the folks because that's just like fabulous. Because there is bravery in like just showing up every day. That's what's crazy, right?
yeah,
The white male counterparts. I mean, there are lots of intersections there. Don't get me wrong, but a hetero white male counterpart with no mental health challenges showing up every day is just like business as usual. But for the onlys of the workplace, showing up every day is just being bold and then just exceeding all expectations, doing everything, speaking up. That's a whole other level.
yep, for sure. I agree with you.
And so you did something really bold that I heard of, which was um, you once asked your supervisor for a 30% pay raise and you got it. So bless you on that because you know your worth and you found a way to negotiate it. So sprinkle some like advice and knowledge our way here of how can onlys go negotiate their own worth even in their current jobs and not only when they're like going into the next stage or a next company or whatever that might be.
Yeah, so that was I mean, I didn't realize I was being bold. I think I was young and inexperienced, but now I realize like, okay. Sometimes let's see. I'm so action oriented that after the fact I'm like, wow, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But you know what I mean? I'll
Mm,
try. In that case, I was grossly underpaid. I went and got data online of like this is what this position at other companies make. I started interviewing at other companies. Uh, I printed all of that out. This was the time where printers were still cool. I'm old, but
yes.
I printed all of that out and I walked into the CEO's office and I was like, "This is what I would like to make, and if you can't meet me here, I will go elsewhere." And I mean, listen, you can make an ultimatum, but know that you can't play that card often, right?
Right.
It happened to work at that time. I remember my parents. Just funny that you talk about immigrant parents too, but my parents were like, "What were you thinking? You didn't even have that other job." And I was like, "Yeah, but I could have gotten it." It was one of those times where I was like, "Oh, it's fine." But what I will
Yes.
say about raises and knowing your worth, something that I've learned as I've gotten more mature and maybe it's not that I'm less bold, but I've realized how to play my cards a little bit better. Is ask for what you want up front. Be courageous in having the uncomfortable conversation. Sometimes people are so scared of a rejection, but you know what's worse than rejection? Not trying at all, first of
Yeah.
all. And also sit with them. Let's assume it's a no, or let's assume that you're not sure what they're going to say. Like in my case, I want to be a CMO. So I'll sit with my direct supervisor and say, I want to be a CMO. What in your mind does that mean that I need to be like? What do I perform? At what level do I need to be performing? What do I need to deliver? And if I can do all of that, I want to make this much. And typically, if you have literally those things documented in that agreement with your direct supervisor, it seems to work. It's
Yes.
also fun because in the past, I've seen where they'll say, oh, well, this will probably take 6 months to a year or 2 years or whatever, right? They'll put some time frame on it.
Yeah.
If you can do it faster, they don't have really anything to argue with. If you have a documented, like, this is what this person executes on, this is what they deliver to the company, this is their value. And then,
Yes. So that's an interesting point. So I've had a conversation about this with some folks here. We did a LinkedIn audio event, and um, usually when women are, you know, just getting into the middle management position, right? So we're in middle management, we're all like doing well, we've all been like praised, like rah, 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 so excited to have her here. When they're just ready for that next step, like outside of middle management, and they have probably set boundaries out, right? They're like, yep, this is what I'm going to perform, this is what a performance would look like to go be VP or whatever it might be, right? CMO or whatever it is, depending on the size of the company, of course. And As they're eyeing that VP role, or they're eyeing that senior director role, as they're eyeing that director role, and they're like beyond there. Most companies, I should not say more, like some of the experiences that these women shared was they constantly hear, well, yes, you did this, but it would be really good if you also showed us this. But that's never told to a male counterpart, like a white male counterpart, because they're always ready. When they're ready, they're always ready. But it's always not the case, because it's just this one last thing that's missing. So for those women who are navigating those kinds of conversations, what would you like recommend they consider with regards to like that argument they have or the conversation they have? And also, at what point do they decide that, okay, I have a choice to make here, and not just keep trying to beat this like dead horse?
that's an excellent point. So I'll answer your second question first. I think if you're getting to the point where you feel like you're beating a dead horse, there is probably no argument that you need to have with this other person that is holding your promotion on the line. Your
Yeah.
feet need to do the talking and you need to walk away, like
Yes,
go where you're valued.
your feet need to do the talking. Yes, yes, yes.
You know, that's what I would say. If it's a you haven't had this conversation before, you've only had it once or twice, make the person say more about that. So this is something that therapists do and coaches do. They'll say, "Well, say more about that." And then they'll
Mm,
sit there quietly. Let there be as pregnant as a pause if you need to be. Maybe you're sitting there for 4 minutes because that person is trying to formulate either what their response will be, what they're actually thinking about, how do they, and you have to learn more about what's motivating them to not give you that promotion. But again, if it's to the point where you're like, am I beating a dead horse? If you're asking yourself if you're beating a dead horse, you probably are. And you have to let your feet do the talking, you know?
yes, my God, I really love that what you said with regards to like that pregnant pause. That's so powerful, and we feel like we need to hurry through getting to the answer in these situations because we're so desperate for like validation again, right? Because we've done everything, we've shown up, like maybe we've done this a couple of times, and they're like, we're like in the middle of layoffs, blah blah blah. Let's talk in 6 months, and you're like, okay, you know what? Fair. Let's talk in 6 months. You go back in 6 months, and you're just like, this has to happen right now, because I mean, you have yourself to take care of, you have other responsibilities to take care of. And I just love the power of a pause there, because you're absolutely right, man. This is great advice. I'm always going to remember this, because uh in these situations, just saying, tell me more. Okay, well, help me understand that better. Is that
Yeah, just keep hitting them with questions and pause for a really long time.
Oh my gosh, this I just love that. I love that. All listeners, like, make notes, make notes. This is a good one. And then yes, if you're even thinking that you're beating a dead horse, do yourself a favor, please. Let your feet do the talking, right, Martha, as you said. So um, go on out and find another place that will recognize your worth. And if you look at it from a place of like abundance, this is the other piece, because a lot of times in these situations it can impact your sense of self-worth after, like, being like, man, I've uh, beaten a dead horse, they don't see my worth, maybe nobody else will. No, absolutely they will. This was just like, if you believe in statistics and data, it was, absolutely statistically insignificant. It was one person, one company. Like, there are billions of them out there. So go seek that and you will find opportunities as well. So love that, Martha. So now you're in the tech industry and it is very uniform. No matter, like, what we say, it's pretty uniform. I just read last night that there was four white male humans who have not even started their uh, they have not even had the first day of working with their startup. They don't even have a viable product, and they raised 105 million euros. I don't know if you saw this article out of Paris. 105 million euros with no viable product, nothing, like no receipts of any kind, right? And we have this amazing um, group of women. I'm going to call them out, and I would recommend anybody on here. It's called Lisa Hurley and Elizabeth Lieber are running this amazing um, program right now called the Great Exhale. And if you truly believe in the progress of of black women in the workplace, go donate to what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a safe space for black women to thrive. And they're trying to raise is $50,000. $50,000. And in 2 months they've only been able to raise 38,000. They actually have the receipts. They're scholars. They've added so much value to so many communities globally. And 38,000 is where they're at right now. And they're still 10 days away from the end of their, like, campaign. But this is insane. So you have navigated this, Martha, yourself, like in a very uniform community, the tech community. How did you use, or yeah, I'll say use, leverage being a Latina as a asset rather than a barrier to create the change that you needed to see?
Hmm, that's really interesting. I don't know that I leveraged being Latina, but what I will, yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that. But here's, as you were asking, so I'm a first generation American. My parents did not know English. I learned English. There was no English as a second language in schools. So I had to learn English by just sitting in an English speaking school and absorbing, right? There wasn't like
Mhm.
a program or anything. Um, but I quickly learned, probably by high school, I figured out that I was really good at making friends.
Mm,
But let me explain more about that. I'm an introvert. I do this because it pushes me, but I would
yes.
rather be outside with my plants.
I know. I
Like,
hear you. I hear you.
I just mean I'm an introvert,
I
and
know.
like being extroverted does not come naturally to me. And so because I'm able to make friends or connections quickly, I've leveraged that skill set at work. I get to know I get to know the people. I try to understand their motivation. I try to understand how the whole system works. Who are the influencers? Who are the people that need to be in the room? That sort of thing. It sounds, I hope it doesn't sound like it's manipulative. It's not.
No,
I
you're
learned it having to survive in
yes.
school when I didn't even know the language. And so that has been my special skill, I will say, that has helped me. The other thing is that, yeah, I grew up. So, I mean, I started in startups in 1998 before the dot com. I interned at Cisco Systems. It was a bro culture. And I say bro all the time. Like it's still, I'll say it sometimes,
Mm,
to my friends. I I spoke their language, or I mirrored that language so that people would feel more comfortable with me.
mm.
And then I was able to establish trust that way. I mean, I think that's really how it was done.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, so you said something before that though that was really intriguing with regards to, like, navigating this culture, because you it's not manipulative. It's actually you mapping out a strategy. You're just being strategic. You're like, okay, who are the players? How do they play? and
Right.
how do I leverage this play to thrive in this place, right? So whether that be like, in the beginning of your career might have looked like assimilation, like code switching to speak their
Totally.
language and whatever else. Later on,
Mhm.
as you have like probably like not probably, you have navigated a pretty significant career here, as you have navigated this continuously changing like tech scene there, you have taken like that strategy to really help you get the opportunities you seek, right? Because I can't imagine how hard it must have been in the middle of a pandemic to make the choice to leave a company and then go find another one, like in the middle of a pandemic.
Totally. But I also think so. This is just like a marketing thing. I would say for any marketer out there, or I can speak to marketing because that's what I've been doing for a long time. You
Yeah.
have to show that you can produce results and drive revenue.
Yes.
And that gives you some of a leg up. Like I will say that I don't see parity between me and other male executives, white or not, but that's okay. I just keep doing my thing, like I'm blazing my trail. I'll get there. To your
Yes.
point, like I'm gonna break the glass ceiling that I'm going towards. But
Yeah.
I understand that I've had some success along the way. But yeah, you just have to show the data. Here's the value that I've driven for this company, or this is the revenue that I brought in for this company, or these are the things that I've done. You have to self advocate, which I think you talked about, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think that's the key thing is that when you are an only, this is the double-edged sword we like deal with, right? Like we've got to constantly show the receipts. So that's
Mhm.
fine. That's fine. Like own it is what I think is your
Love the
point
receipt.
here,
Yeah,
right? Like
here they are.
yes, own the heck out of it. Like, some folks have shared that they actually have a folder in their Outlook that is like their personal cheerleader squad kind of folder where they file away every single like feedback or email, like, oh my god, this was amazing, Martha, like I've never seen a presentation like this, or whatever that kind of feedback is from whoever it might be, so that when it's time during that performance evaluation, when it's time, you're not sitting and thinking, which I'll
Mhm.
tell you at that point in time, if you have not documented the impact you have had through your career, through your year, for instance, as
Mhm.
the only, a lot of times you sit back and you're like, ah, did I really make an impact? Was it really
Right.
that valuable? And I think you echoed some of that even over here, right? In some of the comments you shared, because in the moment, we've all, because of the upbringing we've had, we're constantly told we've got to be better, we got to do better, this is not good enough. And so if you don't file it away, you forget, because you're
Yeah,
self-taught not to like live in those laurels for too long, right? So this like folder then gives you a kick in the butt to be like, no girl, like you're amazing, this is why you're amazing, and these are all the reasons that others have validated for you. Now go show this and ask for what you need.
totally. Absolutely. And you have to be comfortable with advocating for yourself. And that's something that, I mean, I still work on, but it's definitely something that I had to learn. Also, for the introverts out there, sometimes when we're in a situation where we're uncomfortable or, um, it's new for us or we might feel shy, having prepared all of that will really help you. Whether it's that you're asking for a raise or you're in a promotion or whatever, because your brain kind of goes into fight or flight and you forget about like these are the receipts. So keep your receipts. Totally. Keep them, have them ready, and then have the conversation.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you called out the aspect of like even introverts, right? Because an extrovert will just like will rattle things off, like, oh yeah, like I'm really good at blah 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 blah. But introverts are like, ah, gosh, like how does this make me feel seen? Like I don't want to be occupying all the oxygen in the room right now, or take me away
Mhm.
from the situation. And that, but preparation is key. And I say that even for extroverts, ambiverts, everything in between, like prepare for that conversation, to what you said, be strategic about what is the outcome you seek out of the conversation, and be really clear with uh, how you can be true to yourself as well, because if the outcome is not as you expect, then you have a choice, like either do have your feet do the walking, or be like, okay, it's fine, no, it was a no this time, but I can turn it into a yes later time. I was not dead set on having this a yes today.
Yeah,
Is that
totally.
fair?
And also, I wanted to say, like, it also helps you not feel like someone's taking away your power. Like,
Mhm.
don't forget you're allowing it if it's taking away your power. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we go in like, oh my God, this is the only, I'll give you an example. I just switched jobs and I was interviewing with several companies. I've gotten better at identifying like the right environments for myself and all of that. But I'll be honest with you, after every interview, I was just like, I wonder if this is the right company for me versus I want to get this job so badly because I felt like I could be more objective when I
Yes.
cared less. Does that make sense?
It
Like
makes so much sense.
it's not that I didn't care, but I just it wasn't life or death in the sense of like I had another job. I was talking to other companies, but every conversation I was like, this is someone told me this about dating. Like instead of being like, is this the person I'm going to marry on the first date? Just do I want to have one more date with this person? Same thing with the interview.
Yes.
Do I want to
Yes.
interview one more time with this person? That's it. It wasn't like, is this my CMO job? Is this where, like, and it really,
Yes. My God, yes, 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 yes. And I have a my secret what's it called indulgence is Netflix reality shows. And so I was
okay.
watching the Jewish matchmaking show, and over there they say the lady who's the matchmaker says this exact same thing. It's not about, yeah, it's so crazy because it's part of the Jewish, like the Jewish community tenets or whatever that might be, wherein when they are going through the process they say it's not about whether you'll marry that person at this point in time. It's like, can you have another date with that person? And if the answer is yes, just keep trying, irrespective of like the the idiosyncrasies or whatever that person might have shown. If your answer is yes, keep going, because you don't need to be tied to that outcome with that person. And I'm sorry, that's what I thought of because I like love my
No,
reality
but
shows, but it's so true and applicable even to like the work world, right? And again, like as onlys, we are so tied to the outcome because we have been raised to be like, if you are working on something that has a specific outcome and you don't achieve it, there's no other way to say
right.
that you achieved a goal. Like that has been one of the biggest things I've had to unlearn. I just recently shared this on LinkedIn. Like um I just started my solopreneurship journey, and as part of my solopreneurship journey, I wanted to like launch this course, right? And I was dead set on like, oh, I'm going to make this course happen. I'm going to study about like, how to create a course, how to gather leads. I got 100 leads. I'm like, attrition fine, 4% even, this is okay. Like I can still get my like, 4 people. That's all I needed for the course. This is perfect. All of this jazz. Zero. I got zero signups, and the 100 leads were warm leads, like people who are the ideal client for this. But what I recognized was that that ideal client does not, and I'm in marketing as well, does
Mhm.
not believe in investing their money in job related skills if it's not company sponsored, versus leadership skills and team building skills, like the other skills in life they're more interested, right? So I was like so frustrated. I was not ready to give up because I was so focused on that outcome, because the outcome was launch the course. So I pivoted, I did this and that, and then finally when I decided to throw in the towel and be like, okay, forget it, I'm not going to do this, and I spoke about it on LinkedIn, I had 2 companies who reached out and said, hey, can you come and do this workshop for us at our company? So it's crazy, right? So
It
it's
is, but it's that's the thing. Focus more on the learning or the like in interviews. It's like, did I enjoy this? Okay, do I want to go one step further? It also helps me personally show up better because when I show up with like, oh my god, I want this job so badly. For example, I mean, I used to do this
yes,
when I was. I would show up like a clown. Like I just know because I would be nervous. I would say the wrong things, and
yes.
it's more about like be present and are we enjoying this right here? Do we want to continue?
Yeah, and there's a certain level of maturity though there, because it's amazing, because it takes a lot of strength and courage to look at that process in an interview situation, no matter like whether you've been laid off or whether you've been whatever it is, and just look at
Mhm.
it as almost like a third party, to be like, did I actually enjoy that conversation? And then
Yeah.
objectively say, well, you know what, actually no, and so I don't think I want to move forward with it. How often, I wonder, interview candidates say, I don't want to go to the next round because, and this is why, this is my feedback.
So I have never done that before this last time when I got a job. And I'm 42 and I've been doing this for 20 years. But I was interviewing like with almost 20 companies. And I will say there were like 10 that I was like, no, thank you. Like, I'm not, I don't want to. And they were
I
like, what?
love it.
But I knew, like, I can tell now because I've worked long enough. I've seen enough executive teams and been around enough environments. But I don't know, maybe it's silly for some people, but I was like, I just know this isn't going to be a good environment for me, you know?
That is amazing. Amazing. That's such a great way to kind of like bring all of this together. Martha, I have one last question for you here. Is there a question that you wish I had asked that I did not ask on this podcast so
Oh,
far?
I wish that I had asked. Oh, I know one.
Yes, tell me.
Um, if what would I tell my younger self? Like,
Ah,
what would I tell my 20-year-old self?
yes. And what would you tell your 12 yourself?
I would say that don't take it so seriously. Try to enjoy the process and the journey and not necessarily the outcomes. And you're the only one that like can be in the driver's seat for your career. Because there were so many times where I let other people take away my power and I thought, well, I'm not getting promoted or this or that or whatever. And I almost fell into like a victim mentality, but like
Mhm.
let your feet do the walking.
Yes, that's such a great way. Listeners, let your feet do the walking, own your power, and exercise it every single day, only or not. So, Martha, it's been such a pleasure. I feel like I could keep chatting on here, but it has been such a pleasure having you on the Embracing Only podcast. So, thank you so much. And we're wishing you success and cannot wait to celebrate Martha as CMO.
Thank you, Archita. I enjoyed this as well. If you ever want to unpack immigrant parents, let's do
Oh
it. I
my
think
God. I think we need to have a LinkedIn live or LinkedIn audio event. I think that would be so fun. I really mean it. So, embracing only like a crew, watch out. You might hear us on a LinkedIn audio event here soon about immigrant parents. But thank you again, Martha. It's such a pleasure having you.
good to be here.